Hi, everyone. Welcome to Healing Harm. We have a very special guest today, our Executive Director of Prison Yoga Project, Bill Brown. I'm going to read his bio and then we can get started as well. So Bill Brown, CIAYT, is the Executive Director of Prison Yoga Project, a nonprofit organization that supports incarcerated people worldwide with trauma-informed yoga and mindfulness programs. Through his work with Prison Yoga Project, he hopes to promote social change, transforming our systems and culture to create a more inclusive, equitable, and just world. Bill began working with PYP in 2013 and had served in federal, state, and county facilities. In 2016, he began offering training with PYP in trauma-informed yoga for incarcerated people and assumed the executive director role in 2018. He is the contributing editor to Yoga Service Council, Omega's Institute's book called Best Practices for Yoga in the Criminal Justice System. Everyone, please welcome Bill Brown.
Good morning. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. It really is mind-blowing to see how spread across the globe this audience is, and it is fantastic. And thank you for the people in Australia up in the middle of the night. What a trip. Thank you so much. Really appreciate you being here. Should we get started with a little centering?
Yeah, will you lead us?
Okay, good. I think I need that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's nice. This format, no one's watching you, so feel free to take whatever position you would like. You can lie down, you can sit, you could stand, and you could follow along or do something entirely different, whatever's going to help you drop into your body a little bit this morning. So I'm sitting in a chair, and I can immediately, when I start to bring my awareness towards my body, I'm feeling two things. It's humid, and I can feel the humidity against my skin and my jeans against my legs. So that stands out to me. And also, I feel my feet on the floor, maybe because I've trained my awareness to go to that place as a starting point, and I feel my seat in the chair. So this is really an invitation just to gather what awareness first appears to you as you turn your awareness towards your body, your attention towards your body. What sensations do you feel as we start with this exercise, this centering? And then, you might be sitting there and feeling perfectly still and grounded already, or you might be feeling a little fidgety, or maybe somewhere in between. And I'm noticing that I want to move my body a little bit. I want to move my neck a little bit. All this desk work over the last year and a half, I can feel the load of that in my shoulders and in my neck as I move my head side to side. So maybe just bringing in some movement and noticing what it is that you feel in your body. Maybe there's a particular spot that stands out as interesting in some way. And is there an association that you have with that awareness, that sensation? So just allowing yourself to kind of be open to whatever might arise in your mind as well, or your feelings. You start to relate to thought and emotion as sense objects, the same way we would like a sound. We don't really control the sound, so we can maybe just let the sound be or the thought be. Taking in your body, also what you're noticing in the environment around you. And then if you'd like, maybe even bringing in a little bit of self-massage, massaging your hands or forearms or your legs. And just noticing sensation here through touch. There it goes. So I often find that at some point my body just takes a deep breath and just lets the air fall out at some point in this process of checking in. My nervous system downshifting. And you can even cultivate that. You can take a deep, full breath in. And let that air fall out. And take as many of those as feel right for you. And then maybe settling into just a little bit of stillness and observing your breath. Feeling your in-breath, feeling the sensation of your out-breath. We'll take about 5 or so nice, easy, natural breaths here. And then maybe to seal our practice, taking a full breath in, letting your chest and belly expand. And an open mouth sighing exhale. You're welcome to leave your eyes closed here for a few minutes as we get started. Let your eyes open as they will. Good morning.
You already moved me to tears.
Really?
I feel so I feel so much gratitude for this community and the kinship that we all share, especially coming out of and still in a lot of isolation, really.
Yeah.
And just thinking of our younger selves and maybe yearning for community and like-minded, loving, compassionate people. So thank you.
Yeah, I was feeling that this morning and thinking about how that might come up today. When the pandemic started, at some point, not when it started, at some point during this last year and a half, I got in the habit of getting up, making coffee, and then going and driving around in my car and listening to podcasts. And I was listening to a podcast about MTA workers in Manhattan at the very beginning and how they had to go to their jobs, and their job is they sit in a booth, to sell tokens or passes. And then the customers are all gone and they're just alone in the booth. And they still had to go to work that whole time. And they started bringing in, things from home, And one of the things that like became common is they would bring bottles of joy. Dishwashing detergent, so that they could look up, and there was the word joy in right there as a reminder. And I think we've all had a little bit of a taste over the last year of something that the community that we're serving is experiencing, on a day-to-day basis. I would estimate that even as things opened up again, after being vaccinated, that I'm seeing, less than 10% of the people that I was seeing before, on a day-to-day basis, maybe even less than that. And it's felt, really isolating. And there's been, and at the same time, like, how do we start? We start with this amazing community of people from around the world, Portugal, all across the US, London, I saw, Australia, everywhere, all around the world. We're able to come together now because there's like some door that's been unlocked that we can get together this way. But the folks that are incarcerated don't necessarily have that, and then the people that they're with aren't necessarily people that they would choose to be with. And so it's really, really, and also recognizing that what we're experiencing is just a, glimpse, just a modest taste. Yeah.
Thank you for unlocking that in us through the mindfulness practice, right? And just, it can be so simple and it can bring up such profound feelings.
We're distracted, right? We're distracted all day long. Like driving around this morning. What am I doing? I'm thinking about what the hell am I going to say today? Because we don't plan, right? Like we don't go into this with saying, we got the biggest of plans for this, right?
Past, present, future.
Yeah. And that's, we'll get around. We'll talk about all of those things. Yeah, past, present, and future, and I'm driving around thinking, oh, what the heck are we going to talk about today? And so distracted. And then, we come into presence of our bodies. And in our body, there is a sense. I think it's always asking a question, am I safe? One, and then part of safety then is community and connection. And so am I safe? Am I connected? And so, and I think that there's, I don't know, in those tears, Blair, what do you sense? Like you said, you mentioned gratitude for community. Is there more?
I just think also just like so much gratitude for like practice and Dharma.
Mm-hmm.
Seeing, past Blair who might have been lost or insecure, and then finding teachings and finding community and finding path. And, I was talking with a friend last night and just like, he was saying how many people he had harmed, and then he got sober and was practicing yoga a lot as well, right? And I was like, hey, I harmed a lot of people too, right? And so I think through these practices and cultivating mindfulness and awareness, how we stop harming ourselves
Mm.
And so I'm grateful that I am, on a journey of loving and respecting myself.
Yeah.
And that so I also am like, I feel safe to love the people around me.
Mm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
a lot of
Yeah.
that. Thanks, everyone. Welcome to Friday Morning Therapy.
Oh man, it's I was thinking back to yesterday, and I was like, it wasn't my intention to bring so much emotion up, or at least not right out of the gate.
Right out the gate. Yep, we're all here.
But there it is, right? It's there. And this is, I think, my point. It's there and it's with us always, and we're distracted. And when we turn our attention towards our body, right? It's here. And there's and I feel like, there's a tenderness there. There's a tenderness there. And um and when we start to attend to it, right, I think it naturally invites a little bit more self-compassion, because we can be so hard on ourselves. And then when we realize, how really sensitive we are, at least I'll speak for myself, I can be so hard on myself. And then when I realize how sensitive, I am to that, it uh, shifts something inside of me. And I think then this also invites immediately, like starts to change our relationship with the whole world around us, because we can recognize, if we can, feel our own suffering, then we can start to take the perspective and recognize that everybody is suffering in some way. It's a part of the human condition. And I know everybody like gives Buddhism this bad rap, right? Like it's so dour.
What?
Yeah, they
I mean, I'm
do.
partial. I think it's the best.
No, I think it's the best too, but come on, sickness, old age, and death, right? This is what we've got. To look forward to. It's a reality. It is the truth of the human condition. And the illusion of separation, right? That this is like a root of the dis-ease that we're feeling, this feeling of feeling cut off. And I think, and then we have moments where we do feel, when we're in that connection, we realize that this is, a really important part of being human, is feeling a part of a community. And it, hopefully through touch, and through warmth. But here we go again, right? Like looking back into, I mean, how many articles did we see about like the people people freaking out because they couldn't date during the pandemic, and like at least I don't know, they were on in my not news feed, because I quit Facebook over the pandemic, because it didn't feel like community anymore.
Australia had like one, like you could have like a buddy. I feel like I saw recently. There were like
you could have a buddy.
You could have a buddy. Like I saw some administrations being like, okay, you can have a buddy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. An official government recognition of your need for human contact. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
We can get started. But I think like
should we get started?
I mean, but I feel like this relates to it though, too. It's like, okay, so if we're able to come into our own softness and we're able to recognize our own awareness and the illusion of separateness, right? It's like, and then we look at our incarcerated population. We're like, how is any of this humane, right? And I feel like a lot of what we do at Prison Yoga Project, and we'll talk more about our foundational training later, but it's like, what we're really doing is seeing that this is a highly traumatized population, right? Like we're taking this view and we're shifting it, and we're seeing that hurt people, right? Like harm doesn't come from a cared for, regulated individual,
Yeah.
right? That this
Yeah.
is it's a continuation of this long line of suffering. And I think that's why we show up for this community in that way.
Yeah. And something you said there, harm doesn't come from a cared for, well-regulated individual. I think there's something else too.
Yeah.
Harm doesn't come um like, okay, I'm just gonna
Refine it.
there's I've read this book Behave recently, right? That kind of turned everything on its head for me. And one of the things that the book brings out is in most people are probably familiar with oxytocin, right? Oxytocin, yeah, not Oxycontin, oxytocin. Oxytocin is
Okay, but tell us if
yeah,
our audience doesn't know. Or
neurotransmitter that is released as a way of well, one of the effects that it has is to make you feel nurturing towards other people, and it helps bond. And so like I might be getting this slightly off, but during pregnancy a woman's olfactory nervous system becomes enhanced. And the reason is well, I mean, the reason is I don't know, I don't want to put like a causality around it, but what's going on is, and babies smell good. Okay. So babies smell good and women have a heightened sense of smell. And then they smell the baby, and the smell of the baby causes a release of oxytocin. Okay. So this is like everybody's going around smelling babies' heads, and it's like, wow, this is freaking deep evolutionary stuff that is hardwired into what we are as human beings. And this wonderful neurotransmitter oxytocin is there to enhance that maternal feeling, so that the infant is cared for, and it can grow up and pass genes along to the next generation. So wonderful stuff, right? You get a dose of oxytocin every time you hug. You get a dose of oxytocin for other things.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so it's like, great. And then, I'm reading Behave, and he mentions that all of this is true, except in conditions of environmental stress, the release of oxytocin increases aggression towards the outgroup. So you become more loving and kind towards your kin, and you become more aggressive towards people that you've othered. Which, there is I think something in that, that we are capable of so much good, but truthfully too, we're also capable of extreme harm, right? We could take another person's life. And in some circumstances, right, culturally, we sanction that. I think about Afghanistan, 200,000 Afghan civilians killed over the last 20 years, I think, was the number that I saw. And the other, we can only do that. We can only do that if we other them, and if we see them and dehumanize them. Oh God, that was the other thing in this podcast this morning. A woman talking about, serving brunch. Okay, so we go from 20 years of war in Afghanistan to a woman who's working as a waitress, and she's working a brunch shift, and she had brought spoons. They were running low on forks. They didn't have roll-ups, right? They didn't, knife and fork rolled up in a napkin. They didn't have roll-ups. And so she had served a dish and she had to bring the table spoons. And so she drops off the spoons, but then she's got roll-ups with forks in them. So she's going to replace the silverware on the table with a more appropriate utensil, a fork. And she starts to take the spoon away, and the woman slaps her hand and says, "We need those." And she explains, "Well, I'm bringing you forks." And she said that, she says this, and the woman was just literally talking to her friend, just kept talking to her friend. And so her only interaction was to slap this girl and say, "We need those," right? And then she's like, it's like I didn't even exist to her. I wasn't a human to her. And so, yeah, it's, on a continuum, right? That lack of humanity, the dehumanization of the people around us, leads to, that's a pretty small harm, but it's also, the cumulative effect of all of that, all the little slights, that can wear a person down, right? And that just makes society feel like an unkind place or a difficult place to navigate. And I think, we go into this situation, where we're going into a place where this has become extreme, to the point where, we're not only like they're cut off from society, right? They are cut off from one another, sometimes to the point of solitary confinement and for a long period of time. And you're reduced to an us of one, right? Like, does that make sense?
Yeah.
And this is when now all of a sudden the entire world is them, and then we can do harm, right? um yeah there's a quote from Einstein, and I thought to myself, you should pull up that quote from Einstein, because at some point today you're going to want to read it. But I'll paraphrase, that we're all trapped in a prison of self-delusion, imagining ourselves to be separate from the universe. And our task in life has to be to widen our circle of community, to encompass all beings. And this, I think, is really, something that over the last 8 years, 9 years now, something like that, that I've had the opportunity through working with Prison Yoga Project and going in and working with this group of folks that are impacted so deeply, by the opposite of that, by the socially sanctioned opposite direction of widening your circle, right? And then it changes you. It changes the way you see every interaction. And so then therefore the opportunity, you start looking for every opportunity to actually have a real and genuine connection with people, no matter who it is. And there's that happens I don't know, maybe it's funny because I was talking about how like 10% of the people that I would see on a regular basis prior to the pandemic. I see now, and I just like close my eyes and I can see the people who I interacted with so far today. There's only a few, 5. Yeah, and there's something sweet. There's that memory, those memories, those faces, they come along with something sweet. Maybe it's a little bit of oxytocin. Maybe so. I can just even imagine loving people and you feel it.
And I want to hear how you found Prison Yoga Project, but I feel like that's part of us being, I always think that that's part of being a leader, is you just acknowledging human existence wherever you are, wherever you go, having genuine interactions with every person that you meet, right? Like that is how you are a leader in your community, right? It's just as simple as that. Like you don't need to have a big job or a big title. It's like the root of everything that we want to do is just really just compassion and human kindness, and that can be done anywhere.
And or you could bully and dominate people and rule by fear. I mean, there's options. You can do that. You can do that.
Yeah, I mean, it is an option. It's not
the thing about it is, and this is one of those things, and this is another thing that I keep meaning to weave in. And by the way, thanks Priscilla for dropping that quote in the chat. The term alpha, right? I don't want to say alpha male. I forget where it was. I think it was a Gibbons monkey or something like that somewhere. But the leader of the troop, it was the first time it was observed of a troop. There's a female Gibbon who is the alpha in that group. But anyway, it's beside
it makes me a little excited, but it's silly
too. So this term alpha, I think it was Jane Goodall who had coined the term, but it's really misunderstood. It's like, or at least the popular conception of it is like, the biggest or the most aggressive, a member of the group becomes the alpha, and they beat back challenges up until the point when they can't beat back the next challenger, and then they're knocked off their throne. And so I think there's always a little bit of order keeping that happens in these troops. And I remember a story about there were adolescent male elephants in India that were running rampage because they were disconnected from their community. And what they did was they moved older male elephants into that area. The younger male elephants would act up and the older male elephants would kind of like put them in their place. And then all of a sudden things calmed down. And the elephants, the packs of teenage elephants, stopped rampaging through the countryside. But that's not my point. My point is there is like this popular conception of alpha being, somehow maintaining their dominance or their position in the hierarchy through aggression. But what they found is that what she noticed, what she observed is that the chimps that did that, when they were taken down, as sickness, old age, and death, you inevitably will be, you're not going to be the alpha forever. They were kicked out of the group. The bullies were ostracized. And there were other alpha chimps that were less aggressive and also more nurturing and making sure that, like, for instance, food was equally shared among the troop. And those alphas, when they were knocked down from their position, were cared for in their old age by the troop. They weren't exiled. So, you could bully, in order to one up on somebody. And again, it's another one of those natural things, if you shock a rat, the rat has increased cortisol levels. And then if the rat has another rat that they can go and bite in turn, it helps them relieve their stress. And so bullying can be a way of relieving stress. Unfortunately, it just passes it along. There's better ways that don't continue to perpetuate it, right?
How'd you find Prison Yoga Project?
Yeah, that was our planned first question. Like, tell me about your first experience with Prison Yoga Project. So it was 2012. I had just started practicing yoga in it was March 28th of 2012. And so this would have been like maybe 7 months later. I had had a really strong emotional release, powerful emotional release when I first practiced yoga. And so I was like hooked immediately and started going, 4 times a week and then 8 times a week. When the studio that I was going to hosted a yoga teacher training, I said, yep, I'll do it. Not because I want to teach, but just because I want to deepen my practice. And I said, oh, I really want to know why the poses are in the order that they're in. That was as much as I wanted out of my teacher training. And so I'm going along, and I was 40, and I'm not, the typical yoga teacher trainee, in the group. One day we had an afternoon where we had a guest, and it was James Fox from Prison Yoga Project. And so I'm in the room we're a very chatty and social bunch. And so everybody's in the studio ready for the afternoon session to get started, and everybody's just chatting away. And James walked in and he sat down, and without saying a word, he just sat down and he started meditating. And within, a minute, the room fell silent. And then he started to guide a centering practice. And like immediately in my mind, I thought, that's what I want to do. I want to do that. And it was because it was so different than what, it was a heated vinyasa yoga, power yoga, core power derivative type studio. So this was very different than what we did, to sit and pay attention to our breath in stillness. We paid a lot of attention to our breath, but it was always pose to pose to pose to pose to pose to pose to pose. So I was hooked. And shortly after that, James had been in our YTT because he was going to come back to the studio and do the weekend training, the 14-hour weekend training. And so I went to the training, and afterwards he approached me and asked me if I was, available. And of course I said yes. And within 6 months, I was going in to teach yoga with the Buddhist organization that was offering services at R.J. Donovan State Prison. And that's how it all got started. Yeah.
Incredible. Just like it sounds like an unfolding, right? That it was there, and it was divine timing.
Yeah, so I used to study astrology really seriously back in my early 30s. I studied with this guy, Noel Till. And one of the things that we would do is we studied predictions. And I'd been looking at age 42 from like age 29, knowing that something was going to come, and it was going to disrupt my life in a way. And all I would say to people when I would talk about this set of transits, which was it's all around the Uranian return and individuation. But then I had a solar arc with a bunch of Iranian influences. And so I've been looking at this, and I would say to people, I don't know what it is, but I know that, in my early 30s, everything is going to shift in about a 1.5 year period. And my life's just going to be completely different afterwards. And I had no idea what it was going to be. And what it turned out to be was, my friend Deirdre saying, come with us to yoga, come with us to yoga, come with us to yoga. And like I said, I had this really profound, powerful release in my very first class, right? So here's this, what I know now is that this was a medical trauma releasing from my body. And so but what it happened, the way I experienced it at first was like, what the fuck's going on? Why am I crying? And it was because, one, I'm experiencing, this release of this tension that's held in my muscles that's related to this trauma that I'd experienced as a 4-year-old. And then, laying in Savasana, feeling at home for the first time in my own body. So then James comes along and it's like yoga as therapy. What? Oh, okay. So then like this drags me in deeper, and right around the same time. So I'm going in with this Buddhist group, and I'd heard about this woman, Susan Marcus, who was a yoga teacher who was also working with the Buddhist group, and she would bring yoga into the services that she was bringing into Dawn. And I thought, oh, I want to meet her. And so I went to a workshop that she and Soleil Hebner were hosting at Ginseng Yoga in South Park in San Diego. And it was an introduction to Phoenix Rising Yoga Therapy. And this was the other moment that like hooked me into yoga, right? I get in there and Soleil's coaching us up into, I think a Cobra. It was Cobra. And she's saying, so, as you start to lift your chest off the floor, just notice at what point do you stop? Where do you choose to stop? And what does that tell you about yourself? Do you tend to push yourself, or are you very gentle with yourself? And it was like, wow. Here it is. There's this mirror, and you can learn about yourself by paying attention to things like that. And so then, the next thing I know, I'm in Phoenix Rising Yoga Therapy. So this was all, so it's like yoga, PYP, Phoenix Rising Yoga Therapy. I was working as a software developer. That didn't last for more than 4 years after all of this. I quit, I became a consultant part-time, and then eventually I just had it. I'm like, I cannot go into an environment, the corporate environment, it was really traumatic, honestly, to be working in that corporate environment. The company was growing really, really rapidly, and they were implementing a new system, and we were being, had these ridiculous draconian work schedules and expectations and all of this. And I remember a daily stand-up meeting, we're standing around, and the idea is that you share, how am I feeling, or not how am I feeling. They don't want to fucking hear how you're feeling. Oh my God.
Calm it down.
Yeah, wait, hold on. What did I do? What did I get done yesterday? What am I going to get done today? And do I have any blockers? And I remember, and there was this woman on our team, and she said, well, yesterday I sat at my desk most of the day and tried not to cry. And that was it. I was part of an enterprise that was, causing so much suffering for so many people. We were all well paid though, and so it was difficult to extract ourselves from the suffering. But ultimately, I didn't want to just sell my life over. I wanted to give my life to something that had much more meaning to it. And this is what led me into ultimately leaving that job so that I could focus on this full time. I didn't have any other choice. It was what was necessary in the world from what I was seeing, through the work that I was doing with folks that are incarcerated.
It felt clear.
Say that again. It felt
clear.
Yeah.
That's what you
needed. I mean, I'm sure it was much more messy and convoluted than that. Yeah.
So you became executive director in 2018.
Yeah. I had and this was, again, this is another one of these memories. I remember the day that I talked to James about it. I was sitting in my car in the parking lot at REI, chatting with James about you know uh, taking on that role in PYP. Yeah, yeah, and it's been what's so what was it? It was it 2018 or 2019? Do you remember? Do you know rather?
Well, your bio says 2018,
Okay, so
but
yeah, so it was in 2018. This what's funny is we right around that time too is when Nicole started working with us.
hi,
So
Nicole,
yeah, and
our assistant director.
yeah,
Amazing,
yeah,
amazing. Sorry, keep
yeah,
talking.
no, please, Nicole is
Yeah.
Nicole is wonderful. So yeah, so PYP, and I think one of the things that James has always had a vision for Prison Yoga Project, and it's been really fantastic to like help make that vision a reality. And I think we're getting closer and closer with the things that we've been able to do. And it's funny, we sat down with the team, and came up with a strategic plan for 2020. And what's amazing is that we had a whole bunch of stuff on that plan that we would have never gotten around to. I mean, we work so hard, we work so much, and there's so like the mission is vast, and uh, and the number of projects that we want to accomplish in order to help reach the greatest number of people is long. And 2018 really got it. Gave us a pause in order to create, the foundational training in an online format. That
Wait,
was
you mean
something that
2020?
2020, yeah, sorry.
2020, yeah, it's
Yeah.
okay.
So, that was something that we had wanted to do for years. We talked about needing an online component because it's like, so I went to the first training, and then the next year it's like, can you help organize the second training in San Diego? And then we just did it every year in January. And after about 4 or 5 iterations, I guess it must have been 5 times James came, and I went to the training every time. And it's like, there's something new that I'm taking away from this every single time. Part of it's because, as he was going around the world introducing Prison Yoga Project to people and getting them fired up for this kind of service, he's meeting wonderful people that are contributing as well. And he's integrating the things that he's learning. And Josephine Wickstrom, right, is like a huge part of this. Josephine has been doing this work longer than she's been part of PYP, but when she came together with PYP, it's like a natural fit and relationship, and she really strengthened the trauma informed aspect of it because she's so knowledgeable, and knowledgeable not just in a knowledgeable, like it lives in her, body, right? And so, yeah, so much growth. But then, so we've always thought, well, then there's also all this information about the 2.3 million people and $80.1 billion a year, and rates of incarceration, and racial disparities or overrepresentation of certain groups, and all of this stuff. You can't cram that into 14 hours in a weekend and expect people to walk away. And so what we really have wanted to do for a long time is give people an opportunity to sit and marinate in this information, right? And so so expanding that has get that, like, move at your own pace, take as long as you want, come to the foundational training workshops once, twice, 3 times. I'm really hoping that we get more opportunities for more people to start cross interacting, like so that we're not in a unidirectional format. The foundational training workshops are one way we're doing that right now. One of the things that we would love to do also is introduce a consultation group. This is another fantastic idea that Josephine's brought that we will get to as more and more facilities start to open, where our facilitators are able to drop in on a Zoom call and discuss like cases, as you would with a group of psychotherapists. Like, I'm having problems with this, CO, what do I do? Yeah.
Well, so you and I had talked about this the other day too, and someone that we're going to be interviewing in October, Dr. Patty, she, she's kind of like this space holder so she's in the room kind of being the space holder. So she's participating, but she saw that there was a need to almost be like a therapist after a facilitator was coming out, right? Because when we're in these situations, there is opportunity for vicarious trauma. And so what it sounds like that this consultation group or this potential of this opportunity is for other people to hold space for you, right?
Yeah. And this is such an important thing for people working in prisons and jails. You need to be part of an organization, and your organization should be part of a larger organization that brings together other organizations, because things happen and we're exposed to or hear about stories. And I don't want to, I think if we haven't experienced prison or jail ourselves, then we might have a picture of it as like this place where, 24/7, people are getting shivved and, that it's just like rampant violence and it's not really like that. But things do happen. And then you're experiencing the trauma of people who are isolated. And to me, when I talk about vicarious trauma, it's not so much that that there may be an aggressive traumatic thing happening in the environment itself, but the environment and the isolation is itself that human disconnection and that othering that happens between the people who are incarcerated and the people who are doing the incarcerating. That split, that us versus them, is traumatizing for both sides. And this is another thing that's really, really, the longer I've been in this and deeper and deeper, I never went in, well, I'm hostile towards the system to the end. There is a different way of addressing harm that is not incarceration. And we'll get there somewhere, but I'm not hostile towards the people, which isn't to say that I wouldn't, there are people within the system, there are, officers that are abusive towards people who are incarcerated. They need to be stopped. But there are also a lot of people there that are, coming from the same kind of backgrounds as the folks that are incarcerated. So they had traumatic upbringings in their background. So they're carrying trauma. So it's the trauma that people are bringing in with them, and then it's the situation that is traumatizing. And yeah, and we're feeling that. And we need a way to be able to process that. And we have, which is to be in community, and it's to be in community with people who understand what we've gone through. I mean, it's like if you talk to any people who have served in Afghanistan, for instance, they are going to feel more comfortable talking with other people who've had that same experience. And I think it can be frustrating for their spouses and loved ones that there's a part of their lives that they have a really hard time sharing. Yeah, I got to figure out when you know what's happening with me, don't you, Blair? All the little chat things keep coming up and then my eye goes,
I know, it's okay. I'm watching you and I'm seeing them as well. And I know half the people. So, and you're staying on task. It's perfect. Right? It's good. No,
I can maintain focus. I'm going to have to watch this back later and see how coherent everything was.
Well, okay, so what I feel like what we were wanting to do with this as well, it's like not only just talk about Prison Yoga Project, but like have an opportunity to listen and connect with you too. So like if someone is watching this and they haven't done our foundational training, like these are the kind of conversations that we'll have, maybe a little bit more structured in our workshops during our foundational training, right? And to bring it to a personal story, it was being in a workshop with you almost a year ago. I just checked my email and it was August 26th that you guys did a soft launch of your foundational training online. I signed up immediately. And it was by being in community with you that I was like, I need to do this. I want to do this. And I remember I had an email composed to you about throwing my ring in the hat, seeing if you were looking to hire anyone or if you wanted any volunteers. And I had my resume and I was like, okay, the worst thing that could happen is that he says no. And I remember pressing send. And then we had spoken for a couple months and then I came on the team in January. And like, but it's been a year since you've launched the foundational training and really like what you've created is absolutely outstanding.
I want to make sure the you that you're referring to is Prison Yoga Project, right? Nicole
James.
Yeah, I mean, and then all the people who reviewed it and contributed and yeah, thank you. Just, I mean, think about what was going on, right? Like it didn't happen overnight. So if we launched that in on October, or I think you said August 26th. Yeah. I mean, we worked on that and we wrote that, I think probably we began in May or June, because there was this initial shock of adjusting to like, what are we going to do? And of course, I mean, you don't like, it would take hours to unpack, like all the weirdness of this last year around grants and programming and all of this. But yeah, I mean, it's in the midst of, this eruption of Black Lives Matters. In the midst of like the places early in the pandemic that were the hardest hit were prisons and jails, as well as adult living facilities. But, with San Quentin State Prison, and which was not one of the first one hits. One of the first one hit, I think, was Marion Correctional Facility. And so we're seeing like, we know like when it gets in, it's spreading, because you worked in prison or jail for any amount of time. Like you just know that like once a year, they call it the crud down at RJD, the crud gets in and then everybody's got the crud and then it just sweeps through and 4 weeks later, everybody's better again, after the disease tears through the population. So we knew that once it got into correctional facilities, there's just no stopping it because of the conditions. And that's what was happening. And it would be like, everything's okay until it's not, and then it's awful. And so San Quentin, because it's where, James started Prison Yoga Project, is something that's, near and dear to his heart and something he keeps an eye on. And they were COVID free up until May 29th. And then on May 29th, the first cases were reported. And then within 6 months, no, not 6 months, 6 weeks, sorry, 80% of the population had been infected. And, like, I think more than 24 people died ultimately. you know, it was entirely preventable because the folks that uh, had been an outbreak at another California prison, California Institute for Men, and they transferred 120 guys from CIM up to San Quentin in order to create more space at CIM. And so they literally like brought the virus in with these guys. And then, you know, you think, oh, okay, well, you know, 28 died, but then like, what's the long-term impact on all the, you know, 2,800 men that were infected? And, you know, we know that in order to create social distance with folks, they were moving people into solitary confinement. You know, like if you got sick, you got moved into solitary. And uh, and then when they ran out of space to move people, the advice for social distancing became to sleep head to toe. So you're supposed to put your head down on the side of your bunk where your cellie's feet would be. And just having been in San Quentin and seeing the physical space, you know, which like one of my participants was telling me that like you sit on your bunk, you can have your shoulder up against the wall here and you can reach out and your fingertips can touch the wall on the opposite side. Like this is the width of your cell. And I mean, it's iron bar front to it, 2 bunks, narrow little strip, toilet back here, sink there. You know, if you're on the top bunk, you got maybe 3 feet between you and the ceiling. And I remember we went in and we were videotaping one of our participants, and he's showing us his cell, showing us his bunk. And he says, the cameraman, you know, I mean, it's just an unimaginable condition. Like, you know, you're on the outside looking at this and observing this, and it's hard for you to process, right? That somebody's going to live in this space for decades. And the cameraman, he's says, our participants feel like very proud. He's got photos up on the wall. He's got photos of his family. He's got a picture of the Buddha and all of this. And so he's made it as nice as he can be. And the cameraman asks something along the lines of, you know, like, well, what do you think about living in this small space? And he stops. And you could see like, it's like you can't go there. You can't even admit how awful it is, because it's crushingly awful. And so like there's this sort of stutter, and then he starts back in, well, I try and make it as nice as I can be. And it's like, you got to maintain, you got to be positive. And so many times I walk through the yard and I greet people and you know, like, hey, how you doing today? And I'm blessed, man, I'm blessed. And it's like, you have to maintain this feeling, because I think to like just survive an environment that was not, that is inhumane, that goes against our human needs, you have to keep that attitude going. Yeah.
And I think the last question I'll ask before we open it up to Q&A is kind of this future thing. It's like with the pandemic, with, you know, the next civil rights movement that we had and that is happening, right? Like what is the future of yoga as service, and whether that's relates to at a global level or just for Prison Yoga Project? Like where do you feel like yoga fits in?
Oh, well, you know, there's look at all the division, divisiveness. You know, you have to broaden that circle, right? You have to broaden that circle and take in, you know, expand your vision of who is, you know, your kin, to include all species and hopefully the planet, right? And what the thing that I think I've learned about yoga is when you do the practice, right, at the base level, what you're working with is shamatha, right, calmness of mind, part of the Buddhist Hinayana, right, the lesser vehicle. We work on ourselves first. And when we practice to develop calmness of mind, then vipassana arises. And I think part of that vipassana is dampening activity in the amygdala, or reducing activity in the amygdala, and maybe even shrinking the size of the amygdala. What takes over then is, mid prefrontal cortex, right? And this is where our sense of connection and our ability to focus and observe and remain aware, but most of all, our sense of connection, right? Or at least most importantly in this context, right? So sense of connection, sense of compassion, reason, rather than fear-based reactivity. Like, we are, so, going back to the oxytocin thing, in the presence of extreme stress, oxytocin makes us more aggressive towards the out group, while it makes us even more protective and nurturing of our in group. So if we, as the pressure intensifies here on planet Earth, we better get our shit together, right? Otherwise, the lower order, I think, of our human nature is going to destroy us as a species. We have to take our evolution into our own hands, consciously evolving through these practices in order to bring ourselves into our, I'm going to say a higher order, more evolved, more compassionate, more connected,
more organized.
Yeah, I mean, able to act rather than react. Yeah, I mean, it's crucial. It is crucial for the species. And so it's like, okay, and so then, this is the mission here. Well, how do we get this out into the world in the broadest possible way? Well, the foundational training is as much to prepare people and to educate them about this system of mass incarceration, but then what I think is going on is we are seeing the ways in which society breaks down, where there is interpersonal trauma and where there is systemic trauma. And we see it so clearly. It is like distilled and it is made explicit. And then when you see it, you can't unsee it. And so then the next thing you know, you're seeing it everywhere. You turn and look back out at society and you see it in the way that a person interacts with the barista as they're ordering coffee, right? That you're seeing this in maybe a more subtle shade of gray. It's not so black and white, but are you seeing kindness and connection, or are you seeing division and othering? And so you start to see it everywhere. So this foundational training, I want everybody on the planet to take it, because I think it wakes you up into the necessity of really moving your yoga practice from shamatha and vipassana and the Hinayana, right, into the Mahayana, or the Bodhisattva's path, where I'm going to do my practice for the benefit of all beings. And I'm going to continue to return to earth until all beings are liberated from suffering, until all beings have come to the Dharma. So, yeah. And, like all the yoga teacher trainings are like, like the yoga in the West has become structured around, hour-long classes, because that's how you get students through a studio. And I think this whole thing, it's like we're going through a shock. It's going to change the way we go about everything, this pandemic, like in ways that I don't think we can anticipate. But one of the things that, like, we created a yoga teacher training that is intended to prepare people to offer yoga in contexts other than the studio, so that it's not just that same demographic that's practicing, that it really becomes something. And also to change the idea of what yoga is, that it's not this hour-long thing of poses, right? That it can be that it's yoga is not a practice really, right? It's a state. How do we bring ourselves into a state of yoga, and move beyond that delusion of separation, uh, so that we can so that we naturally experience more empathy.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we're doing with our yoga teacher training is radical, right? Like the center of the teacher training is teaching yoga in a service setting, teaching yoga outside of a studio setting, right? Where like I feel like yoga is needed the most. And so Jen and Shonda, and I feel like we have some people, Priscilla's part of the YTT, and I'm sure we have more people that are in the YTT in the room as well. And just
we should ask some, we should open up
ask some
floor.
questions. Okay, cool. I also was like, oh, we can run over. It's okay. But yeah, let's open it up for some questions.
We will run over.
Yeah. So no problem. So I think most people know the drill. If it's your first time here and you're on the Zoom link, at the bottom of your bar, on the right-hand side is going to be a Q&A box. And so if you have any questions for Bill and the future of Prison Yoga Project, any history, anything that you want to know, you can drop your question into the Q&A box. And maybe while people are collecting their questions, can you talk to us about this program Facilitator training that you and Nicole have been creating?
Oh, good. And that's actually a natural segue, because I wanted to answer a question. We sent out a little survey to say, if you got any questions, we want to make sure that we get those answered. And a question that we got was like, how do I want to bring this work into a mental health facilities? And I meant to clarify the question before we did the webinar, just to make sure that I fully understood, and I apologize for not doing that. But the part was like, how do I introduce it to the people who would be participants, and how do I introduce it to the staff? And I want to say, like, that is like, this is the right kind of thinking, the right orientation to the thinking is like starting with the participant in mind first, right? And I think, the question that I wanted to ask to clarify is like, well, what's your relationship to the people who would be participating in these yoga classes? Like, are you a therapist there at the facility? Are you an outside person and you're wanting to bring it in? What is your relationship, and starting with that, and like, do you understand what their experience is, right? Like, and what's going to be most helpful to them? And oftentimes I think, like, and I remember this with yoga teacher training, I remember everybody got done with their yoga teacher training and your head is full of the 30 different cues that you can use to get somebody in a down dog, and you'd go to like community classes and it's like everybody's trying to cram all 30 cues into coaching folks in a down dog. And I saw this happening, and it made me think, well, really what we need to do is, if you're looking at the room and, and if I say, exhale, down dog, and everybody moves into down dog, then I really don't need to say anything else, right? I don't need to give them instruction on how to get into down dog. At that point, maybe I can start to cue some other things, like notice the sensation in your hands as they're pressing into the floor, and notice your feet and their contact with the floor, and maybe, just calling in that kind of awareness. And so my point is, like, go slow, observe, and offer what might be helpful in terms of introducing somebody into the practice, or introducing the practice to somebody. talk and get feedback about what people's experiences were. Like you can have a little, you can do a very short practice and then talk about it. And then maybe that suggests what the next thing is. And people in a mental health context that, I mean, that could be very broad. You could be working with schizophrenia, you could be working with stress, anxiety, just something that is more everyday. So what is your understanding of like what that group is? And then like anytime you're talking with the institution, it's like I think they need to, this is something that occurred to me, safety. I think a lot of folks want to go into this work and they want to bring it into a prison or jail and they're gung-ho because they know how fucking great yoga is and they know that it's exactly what's needed in this context. And so that enthusiasm, I think when you bring that enthusiasm to a facility that might be a little bit skeptical, that can feel overwhelming to them. And so that can make them hesitant. And I think really understanding that you want to make the people who are the gatekeepers to allowing you into their facility in order to work with the people that they have incarcerated. Maybe they even feel a little embarrassed about having people incarcerated, but they don't know what else to do. And this is something that may sound a little strange, but there's a sense that I get from a lot of people who work inside that they're doing a job that they know is that it's not being carried out in the best possible way. And that may make them feel a little uncomfortable, and they may feel like, well, you're coming in and you might be hostile towards me because of because you're a prison abolitionist. And just, I'm a prison abolitionist, right? And I want them to know that I'm not hostile towards you individually, and you as a group. I'm not hostile towards you as a group of human beings. There are legal structures and there are cultural structures that are problematic and not helpful for the context of healing harm. And that's what has to change. And as a matter of fact, I'm not going to try and interrupt what you're doing. I'm going to come in here and I'm just going to do a little bit of something else for an hour and a half a week. And as a matter of fact, I'm going to take these guys off your hands for an hour and a half. You don't have to worry about them. They're with me, right? Go to the control room, put your feet up and watch what we're doing on the monitor. And come back, when you come back to pick the guys up, stand out in the hallway and watch and just notice and feel it. Feel how it's different. And I've seen it time and time again, like there's a shift that starts to happen in the system. But yeah, don't come, like, try to understand where folks are coming from. Meet the administration, the people in the room, all of it. And I'm going to email you later and I'm going to ask if that question was helpful, or if that response was helpful to your question, and if there are any more details that you'd like to share that might help me refine that answer.
So I just want to acknowledge Miranda, because Miranda, I love you so much. And I can't wait to have you back on another webinar again. She just wrote a really sweet, compassionate note. So we love you too, Miranda. But the reason why I wanted to say it out loud is because the person below you, Todd, says, any statistics available to assist hospital administration, VA administration. So Todd, I want to connect you with Miranda actually right now. So Miranda facilitated for a very long time working with VA and doing yoga. So I actually think that you guys would be a really great opportunity to connect right there as well.
Yeah. And the research is out there. The research is out there more and more to talk about, the efficacy of this stuff. And this is what the system needs in order to be able to go up to their, the people who, hold the purse strings that are going to fund these types of programs. You could do research through PubMed. There are also different groups that work with veterans, and they might be able to provide immediate access to those, the evidence that supports this. I don't have those stats at my fingertips, though.
Yes, you guys can connect on the chat as well. And yeah, awesome. There, Miranda's on it. Perfect. We have a question from Cami. When do you think the yoga programs will open back up in the prisons, and what can we do to be supportive of incarcerated populations in the meantime?
Yeah, I don't know. So what we saw over the summer was places starting to open up, and then within a few months closing back down again. I know that Nicole was able to go back in Arkansas. James was able, and the whole crew was able to go back in San Quentin, but then that's all been shut down. And so I don't know when exactly we are going to be able to go back in. I can't say that with confidence. If you're in contact with somebody who's incarcerated, write letters, have the phone calls. If you can do video calls, do that. That's the most important thing, I think, right now, from an individual level, if you have that connection already. And maybe, and there are also websites where you can go and find pen pals, prison pen pals. That would be a fantastic thing to do. You don't have to go heavy on the yoga unless they're asking, but I've found on those prison yoga pen pal sites people who talk about, I do meditation or I do yoga, things like that. So you might do that. And, one of the things that always occurs to me is what we send books to people who write to request them free of charge for people who are incarcerated, but then we also have an opportunity for family members to purchase a book to have sent to their loved ones. And I process the orders, and I print out the shipping label, and I put them in the envelope, and I take them down to the post office. And I always think about those two people and their relationship, and that there's somebody on the outside who's maybe feeling anxious and wants to do something supportive for their friend or loved one. And then there's a person who is possibly incarcerated for the first time, who might be scared, and their loved one is doing something, this is a little story I tell myself to out of their feeling of frustration and not being able to. So don't forget about folks who are cut off from the people who are incarcerated. So if you know somebody who's got a son or a daughter who's incarcerated, they're probably feeling very anxious right now. What we're doing, we created a correspondence course, and we're going to be integrating that with all of our in-person programming. But then we're also going to be looking at ways that how can we expand this into places where, like, a lot of these prisons are located in rural places, and there's not a facilitator who can go in. And so we want this correspondence course to be available for those folks going forward. And it's really designed to help people develop a daily practice. We've made a set of videos to go along with that we're distributing to institutions free of charge, so that they can put that on their institutional closed circuit television. Yeah.
And I think also with that too, I'll just say that maybe Priscilla can drop the facilitator form in there. So if you are interested in facilitating, it could be through our correspondence course. We're looking at different ways of technology of being able to just get yoga into facilities and have programming, right? Because the future is uncertain.
Mm-hmm.
And I think our mission is to serve as many people as possible. And it's going to look different at every facility, and it's going to look different at every state.
Yeah.
So if this is something that you're interested in, fill out the facilitator form and we'll get back to you and we'll start that conversation.
Yeah.
A lot of, I think what we do is that we will give you the tools, but a lot of it is going to be on your own initiative of you contacting a warden, of you pitching programs. We'll help you with everything, but it's really going to be your compassion and your fire that is going to lead and carve the path for you to start kind of new programming.
Yeah. Cool passion, right? Cool passion. Yeah. And this is really important, understand that, those programs are built by individuals. This was the position that I was in. James was able to make an initial contact with me for the Buddhist group that was going into RJD, right? So you want to start a program, is there another group that you could volunteer with in order to get familiarity with the facility to start, so that you start to build, connections and relationships that are ultimately going to help you open up a program doing yoga in a prison or a jail, right? And that legwork is something that you have to do. I mean, there are places like San Diego where we've got the relationships with the jails, the youth detention centers, the parole board, or not parole board, but the parole people, and then in the prison, and and maybe you're in San Diego, in which case it's perfect, because then you can just go in and you can start shadowing, and then ultimately you can take over the reins as a facilitator. But in the majority of cases, you're going to be the one who's going to have to do the work. We can't do that work to start the program. We're dependent on people to do that. Yeah.
And then tying this into Alice is asking about virtual programs in prisons. And I mean, I feel like I have a small answer that I think it varies. We just did an interview with Susie Weigel. So you can look at that on our past webinars. And she talks a little bit about how she was facilitating virtually for youth during the pandemic. But maybe Bill, you can talk more about what that potential is, or what it looks like, or what it doesn't look like for teaching yoga virtually.
Yeah, one of the things that I want to just emphasize is there is no substitute for doing this in person, because there's a component of it we had a video that we made at the end of last year with Kamani Randall, who was one of James's participants, and he talks about the trauma that he'd experienced that ultimately led him to a feeling of nobody cares about me, and the corollary is why should I care about anybody else? And so he tells the story of I don't even know how I got into yoga class, but here's this white dude and he keeps coming back week after week. Every Tuesday he's there, doesn't matter, rain or shine. And I started to think maybe there's some good people in this world. And that, this is the thing, right? That is helping him to heal and reintegrate into society. This consistency of the relationship. And it's not just that James was showing up, but he's also showing up in a particular way, and James is showing up, and also you get into a space where okay, I'm starting to it's I'm in relationship with other people and I feel good. I'm in relationship with people and I feel relaxed and safe. I'm in relationship with people, and then it's we work our way back. Doesn't happen overnight. So oh yeah, so there is no excuse, or there's no substitute for the in-person programming, because this is where the greatest potential lies. That said, I've had guys come up to me when we visit a prison like CMC, where we had just first started programming, and a guy came up to us. He wasn't even in hadn't made it off the wait list. He didn't make the roster, but he wanted to come over, and he brought me his copy of the book that he had received like 8 years prior. And so he's been practicing all by himself 8 years prior, but not all by himself, because there's 33,000 or probably 36,000 people at this point who got a copy of that book and who are practicing along with him. And who are a part of the Prison Yoga Project, whether they've ever encountered another person. But that's this spiritually, it's there. Virtual, not answering the question. Most facilities technologically, it's just not there. They don't have the technology for it, more so in youth facilities than in other, and everything's changing. And this pandemic is forcing the parts of the system that are providing rehabilitative programming are working towards creating that technological access. We just don't want it to take away. Like, I want it to add to, but I don't want it to take away from the in-person, wherever we can support that.
And you were talking about consistency. And so I feel like consistency is also about sustainability. And so, we don't want these to be volunteer programs, right? Like, we want people to be compensated energetically for your time, for your study, for the way that you show up, right?
Yeah.
And so I think what we're wanting to do, and what we are doing, is creating long-term relationships, right? And that means funding. It means creating relationships with local communities and jails. And, we have all these resources to support you in doing that, right? Like, that this doesn't have to be martyrdom. This doesn't have to be volunteer, right? That there is an opportunity for you to show up, and that it can, buy you groceries, right? Like that it can all be mutually beneficial, right?
Yeah.
Like, when we show up for community, community can show up for us.
Well, I mean, one of the ways that I look at this is like I want a society that values things like trauma healing. I want a society that values things like education. And, you look at so many like professions that are essential, and they're the most poorly compensated folks in society, and it's like, I just want a society that values health and well-being and taking care of people, over entertainment, and over just sheer capital wealth building. All right, we should put an official bow on this. And
okay, wait, hold on.
Okay.
Two more things really quick. Sonia, I want to tell you, she said, "Hey, Bill, you'll be happy to hear that we're about to start another program, 4 classes a week at another women's prison here, fully funded."
Oh,
congratulations.
Sweet. Nice.
Awesome.
This is Sonia. Yeah. Sweet.
Yeah.
I mean, this is so here's another good example, right? Like, Sonia is I forget how many years now it's been. I feel like it's been 5. Bless you. And her initiative in getting programs started in Australia, it's like a thing, and it's a thing in Australia because of Sonia's work, to bring this and to maintain the relationship, and to conduct herself in a professional way and in a compassionate way with the participants. And it it's like the system that, I mean, it's truth. The truth will out, right? And it takes a lot of force to harm, right? And I think like, it's much easier to heal. And as we start to move in that direction. It's just the natural, true and energy, and the pathways are going to open up.
And sorry, I got a little distracted because there's all
okay.
the chats and the questions, and
Yeah.
wanting to own everyone's time, and just so happy that everyone made it out this morning.
Yeah.
We'll finish. Doe says something really sweet. Thank you, Bill, for being you and helping guide others into deeper self-exploration and inspiring the perspective of walking on the endless journey of the selfless path. Beautifully said.
Yeah, and Doe, thank you for always being here. And I love to see it every time I see your name. And yeah, wonderful.
You are certainly having a large impact on my life, and I look forward to driving into the foundational training. So my semi-quick question and comment is there also studies or practice of meditation, or maybe even a certification for PYP's teacher trainings? So I'm guessing she's asking, like, do we offer any meditation focused training, or is there anything in the future?
So what we have coming up, one of the trainings that we hope to introduce in 2022 is a certified trauma-informed yoga facilitator training. And what this, we've got our foundational training is really meant to introduce the idea of trauma-informed approach to yoga, as well as establishing an understanding in the context of incarceration, and then the connection between trauma and incarceration. And then, how do you tweak yoga in order to be more trauma informed? Because you can do yoga and it could be completely not trauma informed. And it can actually be more counterproductive than it is helpful in certain ways. All of this is mindfulness of the body, right? This is a central part of this practice. And so it's meditation in the sense that we're, placing our attention deliberately in a receptive way on an experience. Breath as a form of meditation can be very subtle. And so meditating on the body in a challenging posture gives you a lot that you can hook onto and be aware of. I don't know if that's answering the question, though.
Well, I mean, maybe there's not a specific meditation training that's happening, but like, I feel like maybe you're intuiting more of like what Doe is asking for. She's just like, I'm wanting to be like a whole facilitator, right? And she sees that meditation is part of being a facilitator, as well as yoga and like space holding. So I mean, I think
and this is it. Yeah, because there's so much more than this, right? There's so much space holding. This is another really, really important thing, because a lot of times the healing, the most important part of my day going in, when I'm facilitating a practice inside, is the half hour before the practice and the half hour after the practice, when I'm engaged in conversation. You got 25 people, and you think about it, that's 60 minutes. If I have a full half hour before and a full half hour afterwards, 25 people in the class, let's just say 20, I got 3 minutes each for these people, right? Like, if everybody gets an equal share of my time. And in that time, how do I want to be? And this is where my training with Phoenix Rising really comes in. It's like a space holder. I'm going to listen, and I'm going to feedback what I'm hearing. And I might ask a question that's going to open things up for a little bit of a deeper exploration, because I really want to be present for the folks that I'm interacting with. It may be the only 3 minutes of compassionate listening and presence that they have in that week. Yeah. I think I've used up most of my glucose.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We are so happy that you all came and you stayed longer, and you just kind of got a little glimpse into the conversations that we have during foundational trainings and even like team meetings, right? I just feel so grateful to be part of this Sangha and this community that is just compassionate, right? And like, we're not like your old coworker, you know, that just sat at their desk and cried all day.
Oh yeah, right? Like I was just thinking about that. Like, it's like, I mean, I would say that what you and I, like one of us cries once a week during our meetings. Is this too vulnerable? You know, organizationally vulnerable, that it's like totally okay to cry in your meeting. Like,
and it's so nice to like for your work to we can just show up as is, right? That we can show up and be vulnerable, and that is valued.
yeah.
So Bill, you are changing so many lives. Prison Yoga Project is changing so many lives. And I love that we have all that our community takes so many different forms, right? That we have sanghas for people that are currently incarcerated, people that have been released and that are on the outside of these sanghas, right? That and we are an international organization, that we had people, you know, from however many different time zones that have come to be here today for this conversation. And it really is just incredible. So we've got some nice comments in here. So again, thank you everyone so much for being here. You can check out our event calendar, come to more webinars. I'm sure, Bill, that we're going to have you back on again, and we'll talk more about the future and all of the things that we want to offer to this community. Please stay in touch. Sign up for our foundational training. And if you've done our foundational training, tell your friends, tell your community. You know, I think it's such an incredible training that it's not really just, it doesn't have to be for your yoga teacher friends. It can be for your teacher friends. It's really for everyone. It's not yoga centric. It's compassionate worldview centric. And yeah, so thank you everyone for being here. Thank you, Bill, for all of your work. Thank you, Nicole. Thank you, Priscilla. Yes, and yeah, thank you for being here with Healing Harm.
Yeah. Stay.